And for the recording, I'll just repeat that. So if you're taking notes on your computer, that's fine, good luck. If you are not taking notes on your computer should not be up. I'd appreciate it if it's not up. If you've got some sort of family emergency that's developing right now and you need to be in touch with them, just let me know. The course entry assignment. I'm sure most of you have already taken courses here, but if you go into the content, course entry assignment, yes, it's a hoop you have to jump through. Now, if you'll notice, let's do preview. Supposedly this is what you see. You'll see down here, content isn't available, and so forth. You need to do the course entry assignment first before you do it, before you can access pretty much most of the course. A dummy assignment. All right, this class is almost all face-to-face. I think that's officially 5 minutes a week is online, which means that, could you do this course without ever submitting anything online? Yes. Matter of fact, I prefer that you submit everything on paper instead of online. However, for those of you who do that, who do manage to submit everything on paper, it's gonna look like you've never done anything online, which, as far as I'm concerned, is fine. As far as the bean counters are concerned, that's an issue. I feel bad what I'm about to say next. If you would please, go on once a week and do the dummy assignment. I'm sorry. I tried to come up with other ways of going about this, but if it shows up at the end where there's absolutely no online presence after the course entry assignment, that raises a red flag, and then questions have to be answered, and it's a pain in the butt. So, if you click on the dummy assignment, start attempt number 1, you should have unlimited attempts, and put whatever you want in here. It is really, I've had some people just type in a simple message, some people post a picture. It's nothing that is actually going to be graded. It is there for the bookkeepers and the bean counters.
But you always have to read it.
If it ends up being a manifesto, I might pass it on. If it is your novel that you've been working on, it's about 1,000 pages, I'm betting I will not finish it.
What if it's a good novel?
Then I might. So, I appreciate good novels if you want to post a good novel. I might not finish it before the end of the course. You do have to put something in here, otherwise the submit won't work. You can't edit it afterwards. Oh no. And you'll spend more time clicking on this stuff than actually doing anything else. Yeah, so once a week would be appreciated. I need 3 volunteers. Oh, actually, before we do the volunteers, I'm gonna blow some of your minds based on what I saw in here. I have 2 objects that are roughly the same size. This one is iron, this is aluminum. This weighs about 2.5 times this. If I drop them at the same time, the question is which would hit the ground first? Do it by listening if you can't actually see it. We can do better than that. Or not. There we go. they hit at the same time. Something to keep in mind. Eventually we'll get into why, or at least as best as we can answer why. All right, so I need 3 volunteers. 1, 2, 3. All right, so Alan, Dominic, and Giovanni, decide amongst you which of you is the weakest. We're gonna head out to the hallway.
Oh, God.
Have this for later.
I'm doing it now. I am gonna pause this. Okay, let's assume that Dominic was not lying about how strong he was, that he is not some brute that just overpowered them just because he's Kal-El or Jor-El. So, why was he able to do it?
There's
Dominic?
not as much tension in the middle.
I think you'll find that the tension in the rope was pretty much constant throughout.
Okay. Another guess.
Go for it.
Because if they both are putting force into pulling it, that's where it's going to be the least at in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that goes along with similar, that they're applying tension to the rope and the tension should be relatively constant throughout. If it were ideal, the tension would be the same throughout, but probably close enough. Yes, Trevor?
Yeah, is it the direction of the force?
In what way?
In the fact that they're pulling this way, but nobody's pulling, they're pushing up?
So this gets into a huge concept in physics that you will see again and again and again. Direction matters. Giovanni and Alan were mostly fighting whom?
Each other.
Yeah. Almost all of their effort was spent against each other. Meanwhile, flanking them, Dominic comes in and starts applying a force in a different direction. Now, it did get harder, I believe, because you started out with one finger and then you had to switch.
Yeah.
So, in that scenario right there, it should get harder because, yes, most of what Alan was doing and what Giovanni were doing were off to the sides, but they did have some upward force being applied, and therefore it should have gotten harder the more you added to the vertical force here. But when we write up that key point here, direction matters. I'm going to go ahead and say often. There are cases in which it doesn't matter, such as time. No. Yeah, for the sake of 151, time, this direction does not matter for time. Now, if direction matters, we need a new set of mathematics. Because the other stuff that you've been doing since kindergarten, or some of you have gotten into the direction matter stuff, the rules are slightly different. If direction matters, more specifically, if direction and magnitude, because how hard they were pulling also seem to matter. So if magnitude and direction matter, you're dealing with vectors. If only magnitude matters, you're dealing with, what's the magic word? This is the math you've been doing since kindergarten. It's not a vector.
Force. A force?
No, force is a specific example of a vector.
Angle. Scalar.
So you just said it?
Scalar.
Yep, scalar. Now, I am assuming that when you first started doing numbers and counting and addition, your teachers did not call them scalars. Well, you were deprived. Sorry about that. We're now calling them scalars. Why is one plural and the other one singular? No idea. I guess I should match them. Now, scalar math, same math as we've been doing. An example of a scalar, how many people are in the room? I think it's 15. There's not really a direction to it. That's a scalar. If one person comes in, 15 plus 1, there are now 16 people, scalar math. If you're dealing with vectors, direction has to matter. And so if I'm pulling in this direction with, we'll just say 3 newtons of force, and somebody else is pulling in that direction with 3 newtons of force, if I add these two forces together, there is a magnitude here, there is a direction in which you are pulling, the total is 0 newtons. That's the word total. It's supposed to be, at least. Now, if you'll notice, over the F there, I put a little vector symbol. So this is one way that you can tell if you're dealing with vectors. The other way is there's certain keywords. But if I put the little, what I call the half arrow over it, I'm talking about a vector. There's a magnitude and a direction to this. If I just do that, that is a scalar. Now, properly, this would be the magnitude of, if this is force, the magnitude of force. Probably better notation would be to do that. If you see the absolute value symbols around it, that means we're talking about just the magnitude. Some textbooks will do the double absolute value to indicate magnitude of a vector as opposed to just the normal absolute, but I tend to do this. Now, on a test or quiz, when I am not writing quickly, and it takes just as much to put a half arrow as a regular arrow, what you'll see for the vector symbol is the full arrow, something like that. Some textbooks will use, instead of putting the symbol over it, they will do boldface. Boldface is particularly difficult when writing on the board, or it's not worth the time usually, but that is also a way of expressing vectors. And I guess the third way is what I call the double print, or fourth way. That can also be used to represent vectors. I use the double print for, actually there's only one case at this point that I use it for, and that's if I'm talking about a resultant. And the resultant is just the fancy word for sum of vectors. Sum SVM. Questions at this point? Now, the other way that you can tell if you're dealing with vectors is that there are certain key words. Force, for example, is by default a vector. If I wanted to know the magnitude of it, I'd either have to express it as that I want the magnitude, or I will write out magnitude of the force. But if I just say, what is the force? I'm looking for a magnitude and a direction. So keywords, so if you see force, force is automatically a vector. Displacement is a vector term. Position is a vector. Velocity is a vector. Over here, some scalar terms. Mass is a scalar. Distance is a scalar. Speed is a scalar. If you get a speeding ticket, it's not for going in a particular direction. If you're going in the wrong direction, I don't think it's called speeding. Now, there is another term, which unfortunately, it'd been nice if they had come up with something different. There is a term which could be either. There is acceleration, the vector, and acceleration, the scalar. So if you're on a cross acceleration, which is the one that you're being asked for? Or for which one are you being asked? Well, in a textbook, it's usually context. If you're talking about the acceleration, that's the change in velocity over change in time, then you're talking about the vector. If you're talking about the change in speed over change in time, you're talking about the scalar. However, on the quiz or test, it's not necessarily obvious, and I've gotten better at this. If in doubt, ask. But for acceleration here, I would write A with a vector symbol over it, and for acceleration here, I'll just write an A, and I would write it, what is the acceleration, comma, and then one of those two symbols to tell you if I'm talking about the vector or the scalar. There are definitely other vectors and scalars we will deal with, but in 151, quite rarely, the main vector we'll be dealing with. Oh, another scalar, time. As far as 151 is concerned. So let's do a little problem here. Who has had trig? That is a little more than half. All right. If you have not had trig, it might seem like I'm going to go over it very fast. There are, under review materials, I forget, it wasn't the supplemental materials, it's the other one that's for the labs. I think it's review or something like that. There are some documents, there's some videos in there going over the trig in more detail. If you have questions, just, as always, ask. So if I have a 3 Newton force pointing to the right, and I ask, what is the force? Automatically, I just said force, it's a vector, that is a vector term, I need a magnitude and direction. What is the magnitude?
3 newtons
All right, and what is the direction?
to the right.
That is too much for us to write. And it is accurate, this is not wrong. But physicists, lazy, efficient, let history decide. But we need to somehow express to the right without actually having to write out all those words. So they've come up with a couple ways of doing it. One way, if it's a one-dimensional problem, you can get away with it by just saying, you know what, I'm going to make to the right positive. So I just put a little symbol right there indicating to the right is positive. And so the force is positive 3 newtons. That's one way of doing it. If it's not a one-dimensional problem, you got to be more sophisticated than that. But we'll start out with a slightly more sophisticated way of doing it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say to the right is, I need to somehow indicate, meaning to the right. And so I'm just going to put a little I there and put a hat on top of it. So that is referred to as I hat. I didn't put a minus sign in there, so it's assumed to be positive. And so I hat, it means to the right here because I said so. If you wanted to make I hat going that way, that's fine. The answer will be slightly different. But if I hat is that way, then the force is 3 newtons I hat. If you wanted to make to the left I hat, then the force is negative 3 newtons I hat. We write the negative sign up front. However, that negative is associated with the direction. The negative means opposite of whatever I hat is. So if I have a 3 Newton force acting to the right and a 4 Newton force acting to the left, let's go with, I'll make to the right I hat. And I want to figure out what the total force is. If you hear the word total, I'm looking for a sum. And what is the total force?
Perfect, is that 9 or 4?
That's a 4.
Negative 1 newtons. Negative 1 newtons.
So close.
Is it just 1 newton?
Pardon?
Just 1 newton? Excuse
No,
me.
that's farther away. Yeah, that's what Wesley had said. There we go. Because we're using the I-hat notation, you need the I-hat.
Ah,
Spirit of what you're saying, dead on. There is a net force. I can do it, let's do it the long way. So 3 newtons, total force, 3 newtons, I-hat, plus negative 4 newtons, I-hat is, well, I got something common there, so newtons I-hat's gonna be my answer, and it's just 3 plus negative 4, or negative 1 newton I-hat. It is a one-dimensional problem. If we wanted Giovanni to have been correct there, then we could have also just, if we just said to the right was positive, then yes. Wesley would have been correct if we had said, you know what, let's just make to the left positive. But we didn't. So the fact that there was a mistake in what, I'm just gonna pick on you two for right now, for what you two said. How do you feel? You feel different?
Devastating.
Was that?
Devastating.
Is that definitely?
Devastating.
devastating.
Devastated, okay, thank you. No, seriously. Making a mistake, you have a problem? Do you have a problem with making a mistake there? Okay. We all make plenty of mistakes.
So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's okay to make a mistake. I would much rather have people participate and be wrong than to sit there silently. Now, physics, for some reason, seems to bring out the introverts. If you're an introvert, just remember, you can always make, this is the place to get your nerd on. Star Trek references are fine. If you want to badmouth J.J. Abrams versions of Star Trek, feel free. Those are an abomination.